Hello, everyone, and good evening. A warm welcome to this webinar on coping with holiday blues, a queer and cultural perspectives. My name is Steph. I'm the project manager of the employability and upskilling schemes at Blossom LGBT, and I use the he/him pronouns. Holidays can be a tough time for many of us, especially for those navigating feelings of loneliness, family estrangement, or cultural dissonance. Tonight, we're here to explore ways to manage these challenges, build connections, and find comfort during the holiday season. Throughout this session, we'll dive into practical tools for coping with stress, explore ways to foster a sense of belonging, and discuss resources available for queer individuals during this period. Our host, Muhammad Ali, who will introduce himself in a moment, brings a wealth of experience and insight from the fields of psychology and well-being advocacy. Please remember to scan the QR code that's going to show on the screen right now. For any questions or comments, you can remain anonymous if you want to. Muhammad Ali, over to you.
Thank you, Steph, for the introduction. And thank you, Blossom, for this opportunity. It's an honor for me to be a guest speaker in one of your webinars. And thank you for everyone watching from the UK and Lebanon. So let's dive in. So a little context background about me. My name is Muhammad Ali. In English, it's pronounced Muhammad Ali or Mali. I use he, him pronouns. I hold a Master's of Science in Clinical Psychology and Mental Health from Swansea University. I am currently the Assistant Director of the Gender and Sexuality Division of the Lebanese Psychological Association. I am also a graduate member of the British Psychological Society, and I am also a teaching assistant in a special needs school. And here are my LinkedIn and email in case anyone wants to reach out to me. So the plan of today's webinar is going to be quite straightforward. First, we're going to be talking about some concepts, holiday blues, some of the symptoms, what causes them, what exacerbates those symptoms. Then we're going to be talking about culture, acculturation, and the intersectionality of different identities. And third, we're going to be talking about queerness, mental health, and the workplace. For sexual and gender minority stress models, the most used and followed models in the literature. And finally, we're going to finish up with some coping tools and strategies to use in the holidays. So, holiday blues is not an actual diagnosis of a disorder. It's a cluster of negative low symptoms. Symptoms can include feelings of loneliness, some fatigue, some difficulty concentrating, a lot of feeling that a person does not belong to the society or to the context that they are positioned in. There's a lot of anxiety, melancholy, some nostalgia as well, and it just waxes and wanes throughout the holiday season. And there was a recent survey that was conducted. Actually, it wasn't very recent. It was in 2014. But among 800 or 900 participants, 64% of those who already were struggling mentally did report experiencing the holiday blues, especially during Christmas time. And 24% of them were severely affected by them to the point where they were dysfunctional and they were not able to continue their daily life the way they usually can. So symptoms of holiday blues, as we discussed a bit earlier, is a cluster of low symptoms, technically. They can be caused or exacerbated by the expectations that we have from society. During holidays, during Christmas time, there's a lot of pressure on us to meet up with certain groups of people, to keep up with parties, gatherings. We have to buy some gifts. We have to go prepare and budget. And some of us also have struggles budgeting in the first place, not just financial strains. So that's also an extra stress and burden on individuals because they have to budget the budget, and it just it's going to be a bit of a mess. So, and there's on top of all this, taking care of oneself, doing the basics such as shower, eating, preparing food, cooking, cleaning the house. I'm talking basic house chores here. And then there's time spent alone with family. Some people have kids. If they're going to spend time with their kids, if they're taking care of their parents or other people at home. So it can be quite hectic. Um, and all of this adds up to the financial strain, given the economic collapse that we have experienced for the past 4 or 5 years on a world scale. The holiday seasons just mess everything up even more. So that's another reason why the holiday blues get exacerbated. Another reason that a lot of people experience the holiday blues is being away from loved ones and family. And this can be especially hurtful for those who are estranged from their families, who family members decided to cut them off and not talk to them anymore, or family members who have passed away. And there are a lot of triggers around this season. Um, Songs about Christmas, ads on the street, social media, everywhere. And there's always this message and the sense of community and the joyful season. And for those who miss the people that they really care about, this can hurt them immensely. And this can also make them remember and try to reminiscence about happier times that have happened in the past. And some of those happier times were actually more of imagined fantasies, because a lot of our memories are biased. We think that we have very accurate memories and memory recollection, but it's actually quite the opposite. And we hold on to certain ideas and certain fantasies of holidays that we had, and that can exacerbate the symptoms of holiday blues. Other things that might affect those feelings are seasonal affective disorder, which I'm going to tap on in a bit, pre-existing mental health issues, and structural stigma. And I'm also going to be tapping on this later on, especially for minoritized communities and individuals. And this is where the big intersection of burden and loneliness comes for those who are away from their family, whether it's by choice or by force. And some people find it hard to disconnect from work even during the holidays. Our relationship with our inbox is a bit toxic, to say the least. And some people just don't know how to let go of that, even when they're on a plane going to Vietnam. So this can also play a huge role. And like I said before, the ads, the over commercialization of the Christmas holidays makes it less Christmassy. The holiday spirits are not the same anymore. And finally, a lot of people at the end of the year tend to reflect on their year. What did they accomplish? What opportunities did they miss? And a lot of people, when they're reflecting back on their year, tend to focus on the negatives, especially if they are already in a bad place. And that can just make you feel like you have wasted a year, if not a lifetime, because that's how catastrophizing works. Yeah, and it's just a chain. It's a vicious cycle. And speaking of the TVs and ads, there's something that I want to tap on specifically here, which is the illusion of perfection. And it's the image that we have been spoon fed by variety of social media platforms: Instagram, TikTok, television, movies, series. Anywhere we go, anything Christmas or holiday related, even during summer, is very, I'm trying to find the word. It's like everyone is very joyful and very happy at that moment. And it becomes more of a script. In psych terms, we would use the word schema. And it's like a script on how the world should look like and how a family should be like and how the dynamics and the relationships between family members should look like. And with the holidays approaching, those thoughts or beliefs slash schemas would get triggered, and we will get more sad because those scripts are not fulfilled and they are sometimes very far from reality. And it just makes people disappointed in themselves and in their families and their friends in society, based on fantasies or a socially constructed script of how holidays should look like. And I'm not saying that this is the case with all families and all individuals, but this illusion of perfection exists in a lot of people. And seasonal affective disorder. Popular media loves this word, this terminology, this diagnosis. So the DSM, which is the Bible of the mental health disorders, changed the terminology of seasonal affective disorder to major depressive disorder with seasonal pattern, just for reference. So the difference between seasonal affective disorder or MDD with seasonal pattern and holiday blues is that there is a temporal relationship in the onset of depression and a certain time of the year, such as the beginning of winter or autumn. And usually it starts at a certain time and finishes at a certain time by the end of winter, beginning of spring. And it happened consecutively over 2 to 3 years. And depression does not really happen during spring or summer. Sometimes it happens in summer for some individuals, although the research on that area is still growing. But the main bulk of research is on winter season. And that's the main difference, is that the holiday blues terminate and finish by the end of the holidays. Post-holiday blues are another thing, and they are as real. But for the sake of this webinar, the holiday blues finish by the end of the holidays, whereas seasonal depressive disorder or seasonal affective disorder keeps on lingering till the end of winter. And the thing is, they can co-occur, they can exist at the same time, they can maybe cause each other. We don't have enough research on this, but they can definitely worsen each other's symptoms. So yeah, and I'm not giving you this slide for self-diagnosis, but it's just important to differentiate between the holiday blues and the major depressive disorders. And this brings us to the cultural dissonance. So the holiday blues can, especially for those internationals, migrants, asylum seekers, individuals who have left their homes, their cultures, and moved into new host cultures, they might feel out of touch and out of space. And by cultural dissonance, we technically mean this sense of alienation. It's a potential sense of confusion, of feeling that a person does not belong in this particular society or in this particular workplace. And it's a link. Sometimes it is very contextual, but sometimes it lingers and it is perpetual for a long period of time. And a lot of triggers in society can make those things worse. For example, war. I'm from Lebanon originally, um, and my country has been going through a very tough war for the past year, although now there's a ceasefire, which is being violated. But every time I listen to any kind of music that is very patriotic or very Lebanese, like core Lebanese pop music, or even the traditional dance, the debke, it makes me feel like I do not really belong where I am right now. And it's this kind of missing home, but at the same time, home is very far away. And social media is filled with reels, posts that just anyone can put any kind of music they want. And people have different associations, memories, sorry, associated to the songs. And songs can just trigger different memories in people. And cultural dissonance for those who are also estranged from their families because of their sexual or gender minority identity can also make things worse because it's a double burden, double aspect or sides of marginalization. And there's, on the one hand, the feeling of not belonging to a culture, but at the same time, the feeling of being deviant sexually. Your mere existence is against the norm, which is the heteronormative cis norm. And this double burden can leave people feeling extremely burnt out. So, and that is, yeah, that can that is highly related to psychopathology, varying from depression, anxiety, to suicidal ideations and self-harm. So, the cultural dissonance and feelings of integration within a society or belonging to a society depend on a person's acculturation strategies. That is, the ways that they navigate a new culture once they move to a new host culture. And the first one is assimilation, which is an individual's adoption of much of the new culture's norms and the abandonment of much of the original ones. And there is also the integration, where an individual's adoption of much of the new culture's norm and still retains much of the original ones. So when it comes to integration, it's more of holding on into their original norms and also integrating the new cultural ones into their own belief systems. Whereas assimilation is just integrating the new ones and kind of abandoning the old ones, or most of them. And when people struggle to integrate and experience a lot of cultural dissonance, it's actually because of the two remaining strategies, which are separation and marginalization. And separation is when a person retains the traditional and old norms that they have and reject the new cultural norms in the host country. And marginalization is rejecting both the old and the new and being totally solo, lone wolf, because they don't feel like the norms, old nor new, make sense to them. And the thing is, with separation and marginalization, it's also when people experience the highest rates of depression and anxiety and distress. And talking about intersectionality, especially for queer communities have been consistently shown to have poorer mental health outcomes. They have higher rates of depression, anxiety, substance misuse, suicide ideations, attempts, eating disorders, body image dissatisfaction. And a lot of them, especially those with intersecting identities, whether it's with race, ethnicity, neurodiversity, financial struggles, life condition, mental health condition, it just creates more obstacles in society for them, and it makes them even more vulnerable to discrimination and more emotional needs unmet, as well as sexual and health needs that are also unmet. And they also struggle a lot more than their heteronormative folks in finding and maintaining a job. And that's because of the structural discrimination and stigma that a lot of workplaces and a lot of governments still endorse till this day. But what are the reasons why queer, sexual, and gender minority individuals experience heightened levels of distress? A lot of research has been made, and I'm going to talk mainly about two models, which are the most used in the literature. Both of them follow the same premises, which are there are distal stressors and proximal stressors. And by stressors, we mean a source of stress, technically. Distal stressor, although people might think that it's a far or distant one, is actually all the prejudice events that happen objectively. And this can vary from sexual and gender-based discrimination, from legislations, laws, practices in the workplace or in a certain country, and the stigma that those events create. And it becomes a public stigma. It's that's what I mean by objective. And then individuals will have to perceive this subjectively. And when we talk about discrimination, there are mainly two types of discrimination when it comes to the distal stressors. One is the individual that happens on a one-to-one basis, and this can include a direct attitude or a direct discrimination based on someone's sexual orientation or gender identity. Whereas the structural discrimination is the legislation and laws that I was talking about. Other important prejudice events are microaggressions. And for those who are not familiar with what microaggressions are, there can be comments or actions made intentionally or not that portray and convey some negative stereotypical beliefs about a certain minority group. And most of the time, these microaggressions also imply that this minority group is inferior to the other dominant group. And there's this power dynamic that is just socially constructed and accepted, unfortunately. And yeah, and microaggressions can revolve around a lot of things, whether it's socioeconomic status, age, mental health, uh, mental health, sexual health, you name it. Regarding the proximal stressors, those that are experienced subjectively by individuals, there are three main stressors. The first one being outness and concealment. And it's usually when individuals conceal that part of identity that is highly stigmatized in society. They tend to not share it with a lot of people. They tend to hide it, whether, especially in the workplace, because a lot of leaders who identify as queer reported also that they had to hide parts of their identities in leadership positions. And that's, I don't want to say that's what got them to where they are, but it definitely helped. And it just shows us how discriminatory the practices or some of the practices of workplaces still are. And the outness and concealment can also tap into a person's denial of their sexual or gender minority identity. And it can be concealment from the self, denying this part of my identity to myself so that I do not experience this stigmatized identity and shame about it, and also conceal it from other people to protect themselves from physical, actual harm or perceived harm, potential harm. And the self stigma or internalized homophobia and transphobia is when an individual starts believing the rhetoric and narrative that society keeps on repeating. And they integrate them into their own belief system. And they start looking at themselves through the lens that society looks at queer and minority groups. And most of the time, it starts off as a very negative view. Um, but with a lot of people through time, it becomes more and more positive with a lot of connectiveness, connection with other people around them. Some people have to seek therapy, some reflections, hard times. But as an individual grows older, their sense of self acceptance strengthens. And that counter reacts the effect of the internalized homophobia and transphobia. And the fourth one is the expectations of rejection and discrimination. And this is because of the structural stigma, the concealment, fearing of being outed or being out to individuals. Individuals start to perceive, anticipate, and sometimes rightfully predict rejection and discrimination and violence. And they have to become but actually remain vigilant most of the time. They have to be hyper alert to what people are saying, the way they are talking about trans folks or about just gay men or lesbian women. It's just being always alert about the way people are engaging in those conversations. And it's actually a way of protecting oneself to know when a person can let down their guard in front of this group of individuals or this person, or just keep their guards high. No revelation of parts of their identities that are highly stigmatized. And finally, yes, there are a lot of stressors, but there are some things that work for the benefit of the individuals. And those are having a sense of belonging in the community, having meaningful relationships, whether it's with friends or romantic partners, or sometimes sexual partners that are meaningful, um, sense of pride and a social connectedness with the community in general. So technically, by buffer and protective factors, I mean the higher those aspects are, the lower a person will feel depressed or anxious because of their marginalized or minority identity. This is a quick um, diagram that I did not make it. I took it from Mayer and Frost and Mayers. It's specifically for the sexual minority stress model. It might seem a bit too complex, but I'm not gonna go over it all in detail. But I just want to show you how circumstances in the environment can trigger people, and those are general stressors, whether it's money issues, um, public transport, going to work late, not being able to wake up on time and prepare dinner or breakfast for the kids. And in addition to those, there are the minority stress processes, which are the stressors that I just discussed with you. And they add up to the general stressors, and whether it's distal, proximal, both, and then they lead to the health and mental health outcomes, whether it's negative or positive, due to the integration and protective factors. Or if people are at a disadvantage and they are alienated, then most probably the effects are going to be negative. And it's the same concept with gender minorities. And the difference is the internalized transphobia. But something that also is very prevalent in trans individuals and non-binary people is the way their gender expression. So the non-affirmation of their gender identity, and by that we mean when their gender expression is androgynous, there's a lot of femininity and masculinity at the same time, and people could not directly know their gender or sex when looking at them. This ambiguity in people who already have adopted transphobic stereotypes will most probably lead to more discrimination and microaggressions. And by microaggression, in this case, it can also be looks, like just being looked at as if that person is absurd. Like that person is not allowing the other person to understand what they're looking at. And I know it doesn't make a lot of sense, but it's how a lot of transphobic and homophobic individuals perceive those things. And enough about the sadness and the intersection of the minoritized identities. Let's dive into some of the coping tools and strategies that we can use. First, I'm going to start with a concept that I really like, and it's the micro affirmations. And it's technically the opposite of microaggressions. And micro affirmations can happen environmentally, socially, or personally. And by personally, I mean the way you talk to yourself in your head. Imagine you went to work and you wanted to talk with your boss or supervisor about something specific at work that has been bothering you. And at the end of the day, you actually do have that conversation with them. And in the back of your head, you're very dismissive of this. You're like, okay, fine. Even if I did that, it's something very basic. And this kind of internalized microaggression can be quite distressing for individuals. And this is where microaffirmations come into play. It's just being gentle with ourselves and appreciating the little efforts that we do all the time. So this can also be in environments where people can go out with people that are validating, where people are very accepting. They're just being decent human beings, which, yeah, I mean, we've lowered the bar and the standards a lot, but we're getting there. So this is what I mean by micro affirmations, because it has been proven that they do improve psychological well-being. It does work momentarily, but it also adds up. It's more of a cumulative effect that goes over time. And the more you talk gently to yourself, the more you surround yourself with people that are accepting of your differences, the more you will be accepting of it. And the more this acceptance will become a habit, and you will stop bullying yourself. You will stop being mean to yourself. And hopefully this will last and keep on getting bigger and bigger in terms of habits. Something else that you might be able to do is to join communities or support groups that share some of your interests. You can, if you're based in London, you can just type um, group about book club, for example, or anime club, or any of your interests. It doesn't need to be about culture or your minoritized identity. It can be about any of your interests, because the moment you bond with someone about one of your interests, it can create a sense of belonging to something. It's as if your interests are being validated. And for some people, a lot of their interests are in their eyes, shameful. They're ashamed of what they're interested in. And just having that kind of validation from someone can mean the world to them. It can make them feel like their life is worth living. So this can tremendously help people. And this is what brings me to, and this brings me to my most important tool, which is putting yourself out there. I know it's easier to just stay at home, isolate, and keep on believing that what's the point of going out? People are not going to understand me, which might be true, but nevertheless is not always true. And this is what we talk about. This is when we talk about behavioral activation. And behavioral activation is the main tenet of behavioral therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy. Research has consistently shown that behavioral activation is the most efficient strategy in psychotherapy, at least CBT and behavioral therapy. And behavioral activation is not waiting to get motivated to do the thing. It's actually doing something and then motivation follows. And I'm not saying to just put yourself out there and do a huge task or put yourself in a party full of people where you have been isolated for what, 2 months, and yeah, like, divide it into manageable chunks, see what's actually doable. And I'm going to give you a very basic example. Let's say you want to do the dishes and you look at the sink and there are lots of plates there. So what you can, and you keep on saying, yeah, but I don't feel like making it, I don't feel like doing the dishes, I don't feel it, blah, blah, blah. If you just stand up and just say, tell yourself, okay, look, I'm going to do one plate. I'm going to wash just this one or this fork. You know what? I'm just going to start by opening the tap water. And eventually, you're going to start rinsing the plate. And once you rinse that plate and clean it, you might look at the second plate and think, okay, I already did the first one. Let me do the second one. And then there's this flow that gets created. And this is a very basic example of behavioral activation. But behavioral activation can also be applied to meeting people. So for those who are isolated because they worry that people will not really understand them, they can try to talk to people in different settings, even the most unexpected settings. I'm going to give you an example of something that happened with me. I have been doing pole dance for 3-4 years now. And at some point, I was very isolated. Beginning of this year, probably, actually, end of last year, December. And I had recently joined a new pole dance studio. And I was worried that a lot of British people there will not really understand what was going on in my country. That being, which was war. And I stopped going to pole dance, which usually used to get me a lot of energy and happiness. And I told myself, you know what, just go. Even if you warm up and don't do anything, just put yourself out there. And eventually I was talking to some of the people there. And one of them, turns out, she's Spanish, but her boyfriend is Palestinian. And she was very aware of everything that was going on. And that made me feel understood. I didn't need to talk about my feelings or emotions or all the things that I was going through, but it made me feel like I was not the one odd out. People understood what was going on and they validated my low time back then. And it was actually holiday blues as well, in addition to having suffered from my mental illness. But yeah, and eventually another person there, when I followed her on Instagram, I found out that she is very vocal about the Palestinian cause. And she always posts stuff on social media about the atrocities that that has been happening. And we never had a conversation about what was going on, but it made me feel more or less comfortable with her. And then we became good friends, all of us. But yeah, my point is, put yourself out there, try to initiate small conversations with people, and you don't know, some interests might be shared by the both of you and it can become a bond, friendship, more, who knows. And it's also important to remember that trying to initiate a new friendship or a new activity will not always be successful. And for those who believe that people don't care about them, when they're trying to connect with people and that attempt is not deemed as successful, that can exacerbate some of their own beliefs that, oh no, I'm unlovable, people don't care about me, people don't love me. And you should remind yourself that showing up for yourself is the biggest sign of self love or fighting to love yourself. And even if the person did not connect with you on a personal level, it doesn't necessarily mean anything about you. It's just that people sometimes click, sometimes they don't. And the mere fact that you just showed up and tried is something very important to be celebrated and hopefully done again. But do not despair. And I'm also going to talk quickly about some other coping tools and strategies. Realistic expectations, including money. Do not overextend yourself in gatherings. That will burn you out, guaranteed. Don't overextend yourself. Don't borrow money from people or the bank. Don't top up your credit cards just because of the social expectations. Try to have those conversations with the people that you care about. Tell them, look, this Christmas, I'm only going to be buying gifts for kids, for example. Be very honest about what you can and cannot do. And most importantly, be honest with yourself about what is doable and what is not. And this is where your expectations of yourself can change. And because you cannot change the expectations of other people, you can only change the expectations you have of yourself. And you might find that you have plenty of time to waste during the holidays, and you might feel a lot of fear of missing out, but try to shift your focus on the joy of missing out and all of the things that you can now catch up on because you have plenty of time. Think about the life admin stuff, the budgeting, talking to some friends, loved ones, messages. If you are doing a certificate or doing some education online, you have time to finish it. Watching a movie or literally doing nothing. And the list goes on. And most importantly is try not to mess up your sleep schedule, because sleep schedules, the disrupt is okay. So technically, long story short, when we mess up our sleep schedule, we mess up our circadian rhythm, which is our internal clock. And the more we disrupt this internal clock, the more susceptible our mental health is. And the more likely we are to feel down or depressed. So try your best to wake up early at a specific time. Don't oversleep. If it helps you, make some plans in the morning. Time block them if that works for you. And if you also time block some stuff and don't wake up to them, try making a commitment with someone. Try saying, okay, look, I have a blood test at 9 a.m. on Saturday or on Monday. So I'm going to have to wake up because there are going to be some external consequences to you not showing up. And that would put more pressure on you to show up for yourself. Yeah. And last advice is, in case you go for a walk, so you can be active. Sometimes walking without headphones, without talking, just drowning in your thoughts can make things worse. So if you see yourself in that situation, try to listen to a podcast, listen to some upbeat music, or have a call with someone, or go for a walk with someone. Other than that, I do not advise you to walk without music, without anything, and just looking around and dwelling in your thoughts, especially if you're spiraling. Sometimes it's healthy to do that, but I'm talking about spiraling and when people are overthinking about some of the things that have been bothering them. And here are some of the resources and side posting in case some of you felt distressed or need some resources for community support, or they're having a crisis at some point. Um, the slides and the recording is going to be available on YouTube, so you can access it later on. And thank you very much. That is it for me. I am launching a new social media platform soon. And in case you want to learn more about psychology concepts, some theories and models, psychotherapy, then please do consider following me there, as I will be posting regularly psychoeducation videos and reels. So thank you everyone for attending. Thank you, Blossom, for having me. It was a pleasure to be a guest speaker in this webinar. So back to you, Meike.
Thanks so much. So we actually just had a question come through.
Mm-hmm.
If you would like to take a moment to process it. So I'm just going to pop that in the chat.
Okay.
And whilst you do, I would just love to say that I really love the balancing between you explaining between microaggressions and micro affirmations, and I really started to think, what do I say to myself? And I'm also, whilst you were telling the story about going to the pole studio and actually finding a friend there was someone who commented on YouTube saying that it was really motivating to know that when you do put yourself out there in various ways, you just don't know what you can find. So I just wanted to share that whilst you process the question. So I'm just going to mute myself until you're ready.
So the question, do you want me to read it out loud or just answer it directly?
Probably read it out loud, just in case
Yeah.
anyone else who might feel the same could be. And I'm just going to check because I think we have another submission as well.
Okay. So it hit me when you talked about feeling ashamed of what we like. I'm queer and religious. I face discrimination from the queer community with arguments of organized religion and such. I experience isolation, but from queers too. Can you speak to that? I can speak a lot to that because that was actually one of the main topics of my master's dissertation, which is something called the intra-minority stress theory. And it's actually quite not really the opposite of the minority stress model, but it's complementary to it. And it's in addition to all the minority stressors that those individuals experience, there's also a lot of discrimination that comes from within the community and a lot of practices and belief systems that just make things even 10 times worse, because the isolation, if a person already feels alienated and fought against from the outside world, and then they feel that the inside world is also fighting against them, then this is just apocalypse 101. And when it comes to religion, it's a very complex concept and issue, because religion technically is a matter of faith. It's not something that we can prove to be real or not, at least not yet. We don't have the tools to do that. But faith is what matters at this point. And if you believe in a certain ideology, a religious ideology or religion, then if that makes sense to you, it's no one's business I know it's easier said than done, and a lot of people like to preach about what to do and what not to do and what to believe in and what not to believe in. And with that comes a sense of superiority, a sense of, I know better than you. You still follow that religion. You still follow that organized religion, as you stated. Why are you still doing that? Listen to me. Do as I say. Do as I tell you. You're queer. You're how can you be queer and religious at the same time? Well, you can be experiencing religion in different ways. And for you, maybe religion is love is good, love is great. Love does not discriminate based on sexual or gender minority or orientation. And it's just that there is love, unconditional love. And for you, that subjective experience and phenomenology of religion and God, that's what is most important. As long as it's based on pure love between you and the being that you believe in, then the people that are giving you hard times about it, and if you can't really have proper conversations about religion and the intersection of religion and queer identity with those people, then yeah, it's tricky, because it's just more judgment, but coming from within the community. And if you want to feel like you belong in the community, you would want to spend time with people that you ideally would not filter things around. So maybe you can have a conversation with them about this, about feeling attacked or fought against when you share those informations about religiosity, religion, faith, spirituality, and the way they discriminate against you. And if it goes well, great. If not, then this also tells you a lot about the dynamics you have with that group of people or that person. And that is to be assessed next. I hope that answered your question. Question 2. Can you address when the mind forbids you from doing positive affirmations, or what you call the opposite of microaggressions? I try to do that, but my brain keeps taking me to negative thoughts. This is a very good question, and it's what also keeps people in that same loop of being very negative to themselves. And the thing is, the first couple of times, sometimes more than first couple of times, especially if you've been feeling down and you've been bullying yourself for a long while, and that could last years, every single time you actually try to be kind to yourself, it's going to feel so weird. And you're going to feel like you're lying to yourself and that you're literally gaslighting yourself into believing something that is fundamentally not true. But push through nevertheless. Even if you don't buy it, say it. It's like a friend of yours doing something, a huge accomplishment, and you tell them, wow, great job, you did that. And they tell you, no, 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 it was nothing. Eventually, we're going to be like, I know that you feel like it's nothing, but it was. And I'm just telling you, it was great job. And that's how sometimes we should talk to ourselves. Like, yes, I know you don't want to take the compliment, but I'm gonna leave it there. I'm not taking it back. Even if you're gonna take it now, it's there. Whenever you're ready, feel it. You don't need to take it in, but it's still there. And the more you put comments and positive comments around that person, the more likely that they are to experiment with them and try to feel them. And sometimes when they're gonna feel them, it's gonna make them even more sad, because they're gonna realize a lot of self-love that was missed and taken from them by themselves and by others. um, but also that is the beginning of a beautiful journey of healing. So I hope that answered your question. Not a question. Thank you for this, engine. Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Refreshing My email. Oh wait, there is a brand new one. Let me just double check just to see if it is a question. Oh yes, there is one more, and then I think we can start wrapping up. So I'm just share it with you.
How do you cope feeling isolation in Christmas time in Western country, as my family are in overseas and don't follow this tradition, and against whenever I put Christmas tree at home? Feeling isolation. Uh, this is a very interesting question because it's the epitome of family feud on beliefs and religious beliefs. And on the one hand, you feel isolated that your parents and family are overseas. And at the same time, you do want to indulge in Christmas holidays and decorations, but at the same time, they're not very approving of it. And this can not only trigger a sense of being rejected religiously or holiday belief wise, but it can also trigger a lot of perceived rejections that you have in your mind. And it can just escalate and trigger more things, more and more and more. And how to cope with the feeling of isolation is try to find a small, meaningful family far from your family. And by that, I mean, if you have one friend, it doesn't need to be a group of friends, a group of 10, 20 people, just one or two that you can actually be around them and feel comfortable. And I'm not saying someone that you can just have zero filters around and tell them your life story and your issues and your problems and your aspirations. If that person exists, great. But if it doesn't need to be all that. You can connect on small scales, and eventually those small scales will add up. It's like a jigsaw that you are trying to constantly fix. If you ameliorate one small aspect of a relationship with someone, or if you were able to connect with that person to feel less isolated, if it were just for 30 minutes, let's say, over coffee, over drinks, over whatever you want to do, and you try to actually do that over and over or with different people, they can add up and you will eventually start feeling excited and you will look up and look forward to those meetings. So yeah, just try to your best to connect with people that you know will not judge you based on your likes and your interests, your identities, whatever makes sense to you. And if they not because of physical distance, try having a phone call. Maybe cook dinner together over WhatsApp video call or Zoom, or have dinner, drinks, coffee. Just there are plenty of things that can be done online, which is a blessing and a curse at the same time. But yeah, be creative with that. Find ways to just share moments with people that are in your life, whether they're close or far geographically.
Lovely. All right, so that's all the questions so far. And for anyone who may still be watching live or you're watching this as a recording, we do have Mali's email address on the slide right now. So, just take a note of that if there are any further questions you would like to send him after this webinar. So thank you everyone for joining us tonight for this Coping with Holiday Blues webinar all about looking into the more queer and cultural perspectives. It has truly been a meaningful and reflective session, discussing different ways on how we can navigate these new unique challenges for the holiday season. It definitely brought things up for myself, and I was just definitely some introspective time after this webinar for sure. So as we bring this to a close, let's really carry forward the tools that we were taught today, consider perhaps some micro affirmations that you can share with yourself and others. Remember that you are not alone, and support is always within reach. And hopefully by placing yourself out there, putting yourself out there in different shapes or forms, can really help with that. So heartfelt thank you to you, Mali, for joining us today, sharing your expertise, compassion, and your invaluable insights. So, and to all of you who are participating right now, either live or as a recording, thank you so much for your own willingness to look into this, your openness, engagement, and helping to co-create this safe space where we can support each other. So before we conclude, I would like to encourage you to reach out with any remaining questions. Again, your feedback with the QR code here is really important, and we'd forward any over to Mali if there are any specific for him or just in general for this. That'd be really wonderful. So please take a moment to share your thoughts with us if you haven't done so already. Follow us on Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, Eventbrite to stay informed of any future events just like this, and sign up to our mailing list just to keep up to date with what we are running in person for our workshops as well. And lastly, if you are interested in our mentorship scheme for queer youth between ages of 16 to 30, typically we serve, whether you're a mentor or mentee, please do reach out to us for more information, and we'll be happy to help you with that. But that is it for this webinar. So thank you so much to everyone here, and of course, again, to our host here, and have a wonderful evening. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye. Thank you.